Number 1. To give some background information, this event occurred a little over a year ago, and I still haven't even began to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old 5'4" female, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new town that was a fair amount more rural than the town I had previously lived in, and our new house was a large ranch-style house with a basement. I was home from college, and my parents had left for the week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with their friends, who lived several hours away. Before I continue, I'll give a quick layout of the house so that you'll be able to imagine the setting a bit more clearly. There were 3 doors which led into the house. One on the front porch, a sliding glass door on the back porch, which did have a lock and floor-length curtains for privacy, and another door on the other side of the wall from my bedroom, which led into the garage and basement. When you walk out of my bedroom and turn, you can see all the way across the house to the door of my parents' bedroom and the stairs leading up from the basement. It had been a few days since my parents had left, and I hadn't had any problems. They had sent me a couple messages on Facebook letting me know that they arrived at their friend's house safely and were having a good time. The day had gone well, and I was sure to check that I had locked all the doors of the house once the sun started to go down. It was about 11 p.m., and I was doing my nightly routine of laying in bed and messing around on the computer, when suddenly, I got this sinking feeling of dread. I felt as if I was being watched. It was summer and we didn't have AC, so I had a large box fan in the window, blowing the cool night air into my stiffingly hot room. But once that feeling settled over me, I decided that I should remove the fan and close the window, just in case. Once removing the fan, shutting and locking the window, and pulling down the curtain, I felt a bit better. However, I still couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I lay back in bed and tried to continue what I was doing, though I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I began to hear something that sounded like light scratching. I sat still in bed, listening to the sound, trying to pinpoint what it was and if I recognized it at all. Our new house, although relatively close in distance to our neighbors, had a fair amount of forest around it, so I thought the scratching may have been an animal or someone's dog that got loose and wanted to come inside. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped, and everything returned to silence. So, I figured that I was probably right and that it must have been an animal. My relief was short-lived, as soon after the scratching stopped, from the other side of the wall, I began to hear slow footsteps descending into the basement. This is when I knew I was completely fucked. There was no way I could get out of the house without walking past the basement stairs. We didn't have a house phone, and at the time I was in the process of getting a new cell phone because mine was broken beyond repair. I sat there for a few seconds wondering what the hell I should do. I knew that I would need to get out of the house as soon as possible, and that the more time I wasted, the worse it would be for me. I contemplated popping the screen out of my bedroom window and jumping out, but it was far enough off the ground that there was a good chance I would end up getting hurt if I did. Not to mention that if I jumped out the window and hurt myself, I wouldn't be able to run for help, and I would be right next to the door that whoever was in my house had gone through. So, I decided to very carefully and quietly open my door and peek out around the corner and see if the coast was clear. If it was, I would make a mad dash for the front door and sprint to my neighbor's house. I very slowly opened my bedroom door, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness of the house, before creeping around the corner and looking to see if I was safe to make a run for it. What I saw nearly made me vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, I noticed that something was off. I squinted hard as I looked over at the basement stairs, and was able to make out the shape of a man. What made it worse? He wasn't just standing at the top of the stairs. He was fucking crawling up them like some kind of nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room again, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way I was going to make a run for it now. My only choice was to pop the screen and jump out of the window. As I was unlocking and opening my window, I heard the handle to my bedroom door turn. Once the man realized that it was locked, in a sickening, sweet, sing-song voice, he cooed, "I know you're in there." This was followed by a loud cackle, and what I can only imagine was him throwing himself at full force against my door. I ripped out the screen window and flung myself out. I landed wrong on my right foot, and I was sure that I hurt my ankle, but at the time I couldn't think of anything other than getting as far away as possible. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbor's house, knocking on their door in a panicked frenzy, and ringing the bell over and over. I looked over at my house as I was yelling for the neighbors to let me in, and I swear to fucking God, I could see the man standing at my window, waving at me. My neighbors finally opened the door after what felt like forever, and I managed to explain well enough what was going on for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the police arrived. When they did, they searched my house and found that the lock to the basement had been picked, and that the door to my bedroom was hanging off its hinges. They weren't able to find the man anywhere, and because I'd only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't provide them with a good description of him. Of course, I got into contact with my parents immediately, and they hurried home. The police took my statement and searched the area for the man, but of course, they came up with nothing. After this event, my parents and I were sure to add deadbolt locks to the door leading into the basement, and to the door leading out of the basement to the rest of the house. They also helped me pay to get a new phone. What really bothers me about all of this is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even any evidence that the guy had looked through anything while he had been in my house. Number 2.
A few summers ago, just before the start of my junior year in college, I decided to take a trip to San Francisco. Since I attended my home state's flagship university, I really needed a brief change of scenery. I've always wanted to be in California, which was convenient as one of my friends was interning in San Francisco and offered to let me stay with her. All the details were worked out and I was excited to go. My friend was still interning while I visited, so she wasn't able to show me around, but I had a blast exploring on my own. I spent a majority of my time reading at different parks and taking pictures. She got off work at 5, so I would head back around then to hang out with her. I always knew I was close to her place when I saw the construction. It was a huge project that required pedestrians to navigate through tunnels. I'd been through them many times before, but on that particular day, someone ran up next to me right as we entered the dimly lit passageway. He was a larger guy wearing a white wife beater and blue jeans. I'm usually pretty friendly, but something felt off about him. We awkwardly exchanged hellos before I quickened my pace, expecting him to just drift away, but he changed his pace to match mine and kept lingering. "What's your name?" he asked. "None of your business," I responded without looking at him, hoping he'd get the hint. He didn't. "You're really pretty. Do you want to go to a party?" But before giving me time to even respond, he grabbed my arm. He was pulling me towards the end of the tunnel. I had no idea what awaited me there. His grip was so incredibly tight and he was so much bigger than me, there was no way I could escape by strength alone. Despite being a very tiny person, I didn't have any pepper spray or self-defense skills. I'd never felt so vulnerable in my life. My mind was trying to find a way to survive, but then I felt someone else pull my other arm from behind. I thought it was all over, but I looked back and saw that it was a woman around my mom's age, dressed in business attire. Needless to say, I was confused. "Hey, it's really you. I haven't seen you in so long," she exclaimed as she transitioned into sprinting towards the way she came and pulled me with her. I let out a sigh of relief as I felt his grip loosen. I was ecstatic to exit the tunnel. When I looked back, he was gone. She told me that she saw the guy go after me and knew something was wrong. She walked the remaining block with me to my friend's place. I thanked her for everything and we hugged before I hurried to tell my friend what had just happened. We never even got to exchange names, but I don't know what I would have done without her. It warms my heart to know that there are people out there who have the courage to help others. I recently ended up moving to San Francisco, with some pepper spray of course, and the construction at the site of the incident has been completed. Even so, I think of her every time I pass by.
Number 3. I have this thing that I do. It's simply called drinking way too much tea. Like, to the point where I actually have a whole cupboard stuffed with jars filled with loose leaf tea. And I have at least 3 boxes of tea bags kept in my room for when I don't want to get up and make a new pot all the time. It's gotten to the point that when I go into the local tea shop, the staff greet me and ask if I like more of their black blood orange tea, or perhaps their green dragon mix, which I tend to buy often. Even the staff at the local supermarket recognize me now, because I always buy the same boxes of tea bags. This became a problem about a year ago. They hired a new guy at the local tea shop. Let's call him Tom. He seemed like a nice guy, very enthusiastic about things, and seemed to fit in well with the staff. He was helpful and got familiar with their stock real fast. He actually introduced me to some of their own tea, a mix they called Sea Breeze. I didn't think twice about talking to him. I talked to everyone else in the shop, and I've been going there for years. Not to mention that it was the only town around for miles that even had a tea shop of its own. Besides, Tom really was nice. After about 2 months, Tom asked me out. It came sort of out of the blue, especially considering that we didn't know each other. I told him that I wasn't interested, and that I recently come out of a pretty bad breakup and just didn't want to date anyone for a while. He seemed to take it fine, just said, "Yeah, I get that," and dropped it. At least, I thought he dropped it. Maybe a week after that, I came to the supermarket to get some more tea bags. I didn't pay much attention to anything, just dropped it by the cashiers and grabbed my wallet. When I was about to take my card out to pay, I suddenly heard a very familiar voice laugh and say, "Hey, you, Lady Grey, right? You love that blend." Tom was sitting there, dressed in the uniform of the staff. I got a little thrown off, seeing as how the supermarket hardly ever hired anyone new. Believe me, I'd asked many times while looking for a job. "Didn't know you worked here," I told him, and he smiled at me. "Yeah, I got the job here just the other day. Apparently one of their staff up and quit, so they needed someone new. And, well, I have a friend of a friend." I didn't press on further. This went on for a while, seeing Tom both at the tea shop and the supermarket. When it came to the latter, though, I always seemed to arrive just as his shift was almost up, and he'd ask if he could walk with me for a bit. I always told him that it wasn't a good idea, because I had quite a long way home, and he normally got around by car. Whenever he'd ask this, I always got a weird feeling. You know when there is this one person who you feel pretty indifferent about, but whenever they ask something like this, you feel like you have to make an excuse to get away? That's it. It was fine to talk to Tom, but something made me think that I shouldn't walk anywhere with him. I lied when I said I had a long way to go. Truth be told, I live maybe 10 minutes from the supermarket. But it's a little out of the way, in a secluded area of the town, and where few people live. Lots of abandoned houses, and the apartment building where I live is pretty much the epitome of no one there to help. Or rather, no one who'd care to help. Besides, being a pretty small girl, admittedly one who works out and has a good deal of muscle, I wasn't really comfortable with the thought of being in a secluded place with anyone bigger than me. Little by little, I could tell that Tom was getting frustrated about me saying no all the time. He'd get this pinched face and usually use a very flat voice when saying, "Yeah, that's fine." When I come to the tea shop, he'd ask his boss if he can have a short break, just so he could talk to me for a bit. When this had been going on for a while, his boss at the tea shop once took me aside when he wasn't at work and asked for a word. She started asking me if Tom was a bother to me, and if he'd been doing anything untoward, so to say. I admitted that he made me uncomfortable when he asked to be alone with me. "You're the only customer he does this with," she told me. "He seems really indifferent to anyone else. I mean, yeah, he helps them, but he doesn't get so enthusiastic with them." This started setting off proper warning bells in my head, and I asked her if perhaps I can know when he actually worked, so I could just come in when he wasn't there. I wasn't about to stop going there just because of him. She agreed, and gave me a schedule, even her own phone number so I could call her if something was up. And let me tell you, Tom got really irritated when he didn't see me at the tea shop anymore. If I went to the supermarket, he'd be pushy about asking me where I was, and why I wasn't there. "You go like every week," he'd say. "Why do I never see you?" I pulled some bullshit story about my routine needing a change, and how my work hours didn't work with the old one anymore, and I could tell he didn't believe me. So another month went by. He kept asking why he didn't see me more often, and why I wouldn't take a walk with him. Then, one morning, I got a letter in the mail. Just the wording alone told me it was him, though the content itself was pretty obvious. It read, "You're such a liar. Your routine needed a change. Your work hours didn't fit. You always lie to me. You work from home. You told me that. You work from home and you go get tea whenever. I saw you, you know. I was in my car outside the tea shop, and you showed up when I wasn't working. Why are you avoiding me? Aren't I nice to you? I thought girls like that, when guys are actually nice to them. Guess you're just another little bitch who wants a bad boy, or whatever." Okay, yeah, that was out of line. Still, can't you just come in as you used to? I just want to talk. And why not just take a little walk with me? I can always just walk back to my car, you know. Maybe I can give you a ride home. Not like I don't know where you live anyway. I like talking to you. You pay attention and you listen. Just give me a chance, yeah? You can't still be hung up over your ex. It's been ages. If you're gonna move on from an asshole, move on with a nice guy. I'd like to say that I freaked out and made a fuss. I didn't. I just picked up my phone, called the owner of the tea shop, and explained about Tom and the letter. Their owner stated that he'd stopped coming into work lately altogether, and that she was gonna fire him at any rate. This was just the last nail in the coffin. She promised that she was going to talk to him about it, and tell him that he was lucky I hadn't called the police yet. Well, she did, and it didn't stop. I kept getting letters, and when I'd see him at the supermarket, he'd be agitated, and he'd try harder than before to try to get me to walk with him. Once, it got to the point where he grabbed my arm and tried to convince me to just come with them to let him show me something. Luckily, at that point, there were security guards around, and they came over to us and asked me if there was a problem. I only had to look at Tom to make him let me go. I think he knew that if he kept going, or tried to claim that we knew each other well, I would tell them. Then came the last night, when I'd been to the supermarket pretty late. I'd been wrapped up in work for a few days, and hadn't had time to go to the shop. So I ran down to the supermarket to pick up food and other necessities that I was missing. And Tom was there. Not working, was just waiting for me when I came out with heavy bags in my arms. He didn't approach. I just passed him by, hoping to convey that I was in a hurry and headed out. I'd gotten maybe halfway home when I looked over my shoulder and saw his car stopped just around the corner. Convinced now that he was following me and hoping to catch me alone, I decided to take a shortcut home. There's a path that cuts through the forested area around where I live, and it's a very narrow one. Difficult to walk along with shopping bags, but at least it would let me get out of sight for a bit. I hurried around the next corner, listening for the sound of the car as it started up again, and dodged into the forest. I crouched down behind a bush for a while, and I heard the car drive up and down the road several times. I'll admit that I felt triumphant that such a small feint can throw him off. He apparently didn't know where I went. The path is hard to see if you don't know where it is, so perhaps he was unaware of its existence. After a bit, I got up and hurried along. Getting home wasn't very difficult at all, and I thought it was over and done with. But when I got inside and went up the stairs, I looked out through one of the windows in the stairwell. His car was just coming up the road towards my house. I ran, as best as I could, up the stairs and hurried into my flat and slammed the door. Now, I was truly freaked out. It was easy enough to deal with it before. Letters could be shredded or burnt, and the shops were always manned with staff or security. But this was entirely different. Now he was at my house. I had locked all the doors behind me, and while I was unpacking the groceries, I heard the handle being turned and the door being pulled at. I didn't react much. The lock was new, and the door was sturdy, so no one could get in unless I opened the door for them. There was just one problem: the mail slot. I heard it squeak as it was pushed open, and I heard his voice. "What are you running from? It's just me." I didn't answer. I stood still in the kitchen and listened. There were continuous scratching noises coming from the door now, and he kept talking, telling me that he wasn't going to do anything bad, that he just wanted to see me. The longer I just stood there and did nothing, the more aggressive he got. It sounded like he was trying to kick the door down, all the while shouting about how I was a bitch, how unfair I was being to him, and how I got him fired. The last one, yeah, fair enough. The rest, not so much. Then, the noise just abruptly stopped. I thought for a moment that maybe a neighbor had gone out into the stairwell to tell him to shut the fuck up and leave. I waited a while longer, just standing there and listening intensely, until I finally managed to relax and move again. I moved towards the hallway, hoping that I was moving really quietly, to go to my little office. I was right in front of the door when the mail slot squeaked open again, and a hand dropped something through it. It was a burning cloth, and I can smell the stench of gasoline. I began screaming and ran to fetch water to put the fire out, and as I did, I heard Tom laughing outside my door. "Fucking knew you were in there, you bitch." Though I managed to put the fire out, he wasn't leaving. I called the police, but they told me that there was no patrol available to help. The fastest they could get to me was in 2 hours. I was stuck there in my flat with this creep outside my door, shouting threats and abuse at me for 2 fucking hours. All this while, none of the neighbors came out to help me. When the police did arrive, they arrested Tom. Apparently, there had been several more calls, all from my neighbors. The reason they didn't come to help was that they were worried that he was armed somehow. And well, can't blame them. I was told later that the police did find a machete in Tom's car. as well as 3 cans of gasoline and a lot of matches. He could have gone at any point to fetch any of these. But wait, there's more. It turns out the only reason Tom was ever hired by anyone was that he used a fake name. Technically, he didn't exist, hence why no one ever found anything criminal about him. But the police found him in their database eventually. He had done this in another town, to another girl. She wasn't quite so lucky. He'd been to jail for what he'd done to her, but gotten out early on good behavior. I don't know the full details of the other incident, but I know that she lived. Though, when she was found, she was so badly burnt that she was unrecognizable. Number 4.
I've only told this to a few people outside of my family, and I only recently started talking about it. I wish I'd told someone sooner, as I discovered a coworker encountered these men as well. I work downtown, standard 8 to 5 hours. Once in a while I'll work overtime, but not often, and not on the day that this happened. It was just a couple minutes after 5 p.m. when I left work. It's just a few blocks from my office building to the train station. There are a few bars and back alleys along the walk, but the worst I've ever dealt with was a homeless person who got a little aggressive asking for cash. They don't bother me much. The train ride from the station downtown to the station where I park my car is about 40 minutes. If I'm lucky, I manage to get a seat and I don't have to stand for the whole ride. On that day, I was lucky, more or less. I got a seat next to a window, which left the seat next to me open. At the next stop, 3 men got on. One of them sat next to me and the other sat on the seat across from me, so they were facing me. I was listening to music on my iPod, so I really couldn't hear them. I did notice, however, that the guy sitting next to me was trying to move closer. He would move close enough that his leg was touching mine, so I'd scoot away and he'd move closer again. Eventually, I was pressed right against the window and had no doubt that he had more than a few inches of free space on his other side. I was wearing sunglasses, so I could occasionally glance at them. I'd noticed that they were occasionally saying something, and then they all looked at me. It was incredibly creepy and uncomfortable. I was nervous about getting off at my stop, but mine is the second to last on this train line. So when the train pulled into my station, I got off. The guy sitting next to me tried to grab my arm, but I was moving quickly and was able to get out. I was hoping they wouldn't get off the train there. It was a busy station, and they couldn't know where I was parked. But they did. I guess it was their luck that they'd targeted me. I parked in the furthest lot from the station because the parking there is free. It's about a 7-minute walk, which isn't usually too bad, but my lot tends to be pretty quiet, and I was really worried about those guys following me. As a bit of background, I was fat. I work an office job, and I was sitting all day and not working out. Add to that my strong sweet tooth, and you've got a recipe for a bad body. I was about 30 pounds overweight and probably couldn't run more than 30 seconds. Sad, considering I ran track and played hockey in high school. I still play hockey, but on a daytime league, and it's not really competitive. I'm the youngest on my team by about 20 years, but my mom's also on the team, and it's something fun to do together. I was crossing the bridge over the road from the station to the parking lots when I noticed 3 guys less than 10 feet behind me. I wasn't carrying a knife, though I do own a legal size knife, nor any pepper spray because it's illegal in my city. I know a little bit about personal protection, though, as I took a class for it in high school. So I put my car key and my house key between my fingers so if I needed to hit someone, it would hurt them, at least a little. The guys followed me across the main lot. They didn't hide the fact that they were there, and the more nervous I was, the louder they laughed. I managed to get across the road between the lots before they got to the road. They had to wait for a couple cars to pass by before they could cross. I was almost halfway across the lot when they crossed the road. I started to run. I could hear their feet pounding the pavement behind me. I used my clicker to unlock my car when I got close. I wrenched the car door open, so glad there was no one parked next to me. I barely had time to close the door and hit the locks before the guys reached my car. They were banging on my windows and yelling, jeering. I'd never been so afraid in my life. I was worried they'd break the windows and get in. There was a guy at the back banging on the back of my hatchback, so I couldn't reverse out of my spot without running him over. I should have, but I was afraid and not thinking. I was screaming, but no one was around to hear me. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew it wasn't anything good. I wish I had the screamer my mom gave me for protection, but it needed a new battery, so I didn't bring it with me. That thought, the one about the screamer, made me realize I had something even better. When you're being assaulted, you're not supposed to scream for help. No one wants to help. You scream fire because everyone wants to watch the blaze. So I turned on my car alarm. It was incredibly loud in my car, so loud that I thought I would go deaf, but it had the reaction that I wanted. The guys started backing off. I saw people walking into the lot looking in the direction of my car. People could see what was going on. The guys took off back towards the train station. I drove home crying. The next night, I started working out. I've started working out almost every day since then. If those cars hadn't been in the road at that exact time, if I'd run just a little slower, if I'd been too slow clicking the lock, it all could have ended so much differently. I've lost 20 pounds since then and have gained a great deal of muscle. I quit my job. I've had anxiety issues for years, and this encounter made it so much worse. I never want to feel that powerless again.
Thank you for listening. Remember, if you like this video, to leave a thumbs up and also subscribe for future content. Also, head over to Ty's channel and give his other videos a look. If you guys like it, make sure to subscribe to him as well. But with that being said, until next time, keep your lights on. You never know what's hiding in the dark.